Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today is one of our last remaining divisional previews for the year of 2023, and this time it's about the AFC East. And we have some disagreements on this division overall, and we have some agreements, but I'm joined here with my father, Tony. And what do you think about this division overall?
Well, I honestly think this is going to be the one division where all the teams actually have a shot about being in first place and making the playoffs. Maybe the Patriots less than everybody else, but with their defense and the fact that they finally have an offensive coordinator, I still wouldn't put it past them either.
It's Bill Belichick. Argument done. One of the best coaches of all time
Absolutely.
in any sport, not just football, any sport.
I would completely agree.
Yeah. But up first, because we do things alphabetically by teams, we got to start with the Buffalo Bills. And the big question I have is, what can Dalton Kincaid do to this Bills offense? Like, how much does he open up, like a Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis, or even the run game just being a threat at a position the Bills haven't had?
Well, in a sense, what he does provide this team is another explosive offensive weapon, and you didn't have to go out and pay $30 million for a wide receiver to get it. He is going to actually allow Gabe Davis and the rest of their receiving core to not have to be on the second best receiver. I honestly, or second best DB. I think that he will come in and demand double teams right away. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, and he's explosive. So with him going down the middle and Diggs on the outside, it's going to allow the other receivers some freedom to do things that maybe they have been asked to do, things that they weren't comfortable with over the past couple of years. Why I think this is going to actually help out. They're going to be able to do what they're best at.
So here's a quick question, because something that's been very critical of the Bills in recent years has been the run game. Do you think it was a mistake not possibly getting a Dalvin Cook or Ezekiel Elliott in there like we just saw the Patriots and Jets bring in this week alone?
Not really. They actually, when Josh Allen got hurt towards the end of the season, they were relying on their running game pretty well, and it was effective, right? So the I don't feel that it's necessarily that they don't have the backs. It's just when Josh Allen is available and healthy, they tend to stray away from that. One thing I will say is they did beef up some of their offensive line help, and I think that's going to help more so than getting, say, a Dalvin Cook or Ezekiel Elliott or whomever else was out there on the market at the time.
There's one other player that I think I want to talk about that the Bills didn't get, and me and you kind of assumed that he would go to one of the heavyweights he did overall, and we'll talk about him in the next podcast. Do you view missing out on DeAndre Hopkins as a bigger miss than some of the running backs as we just talked about?
Well, since they tend to be a pass first and pass heavy team, I am shocked that they didn't really uh, be a bigger play for Hopkins. I mean, he came out and said it wasn't about the money, it was about winning a championship. So I'm not exactly sure why Buffalo and, let's face it, KC weren't, the top two destination spots. So, yeah, I completely think that he would have been a huge asset because if he is on one side or in the slot and Diggs is on the outside, they're so formidable, especially with Kincaid. And then you've got, Davis taking the top off as well.
Yeah, there's one last thing I got to ask before I go in my tangent about the Bills, and this is a team that had a big emotional moment last year, and it was very unfortunate to see it happen, but thankfully everything turned out right, and he'll be playing football this year. What does having Damar Hamlin come through that adversity, come through the other side on the better end, what does he bring in that locker room?
Oh, emotion. That team is going to be flying so high, especially on game day. it's going to be just cataclysmic when he steps on the field. One thing that the coaches will have to do is make sure that they can actually weather that storm, because sometimes when you are so hyped up and so eager, you basically wear yourself out way ahead of time. And so that's something that they will have to, because they're all going to be just fired up to be on that field with him. One question I have real quick, a question for you. I know that they had drafted Dorian Williams, but do you think that picking up Taylor Rapp from the Rams, do you think they might slide him in and play some linebacker with him as well?
I think that's very interesting because they did lose Edmonds, who was probably the best linebacker they had last year, and it's not even close. And you are trying to try something new. You got Josh Allen to this big time contract. You have to experiment a bit. You have to maybe find these guys cheaper, see if you can put them at a different position. And Taylor Rapp, he does have a body. He does have the athleticism that he could possibly play inside backer. Now, can he bring with what Edmonds brought? No. And that's a hard thing to replace. I thought that they would look to replace Edmonds with a draft pick who just wasn't on the board for them, unfortunately, because I think he was a perfect fit in Jack Campbell. But I think they overall did a good job bringing Dorian Williams later on in that draft, because he is a great athlete like Edmonds was. Maybe a bit more raw, has a little bit learning to go. But I don't feel like you go with Rapp as much as I would give Williams a shine, because I think if Williams is coached right, and Sean McDermott, very good defensive coach, I think he could be a stud for that team, and he'd be cheap on his rookie deal for 4 years.
Oh, I agree there.
Yeah, and I think the big thing about the Bills is Josh Allen's health. His elbow injury definitely affected him last year, and he just wasn't the same quarterback for the first half of the year that he was second half. There were more picks. There wasn't as many Josh Allen-esque throws that he just made people look silly with. If he stays healthy, if that elbow stays healthy, I think they are the best shot to beat the Chiefs. That's not a shot at the Bengals, because I think the Bengals are right up there. But I look at what the Bills bring. The Bills and Bengals have the mentality of, we aren't intimidated by the Chiefs. It's kind of like with what you saw with the Ravens and the Patriots, when the Patriots were dominant and the Ravens were kicking on the heels. They're not afraid of the heavyweight fighter, and they'll go round for round. Losing some pieces happen when you have a franchise quarterback. But the sacrifice you're willing to make, because it's better to have a franchise quarterback than not. Look at all the years Buffalo had E.J. Manuel or I'm blanking on Tyrod Taylor, and that's not a shot against Tyrod Taylor because he's very good. But the quarterback play is so much better and gives them a shot to win every single week.
One thing since you brought up Josh, I think it's interesting. In my opinion, he is probably the most physically gifted quarterback in the NFL. And I'd say probably not too many people will actually argue that fact. But if you compare him up against Burrow or say, I don't know, Patrick Mahomes, the difference is I think both Mahomes and Burrow have that killer instinct more than Josh does. He seems to, at the end when things are rough, he's going to do it himself, whereas they're going to basically elevate the rest of their team. And I think that's the big difference. And you saw it earlier in the season last year, like when they played the Rams, he was just amazing. He was getting everybody involved. But as the season wore on and they had some injuries and then he got injured, he was trying to do more and more himself. And I honestly think that when he is in that position, he regresses to more of the Josh Allen from 2 to 3 years ago than the Josh Allen of like the beginning of last year.
Well, then I'm just going to take this real quick because I think we could see maybe a different Allen this year. And the reason why I say that is because in years past, he's only had Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is a very good wide receiver. I'm not trying to knock him down for any Bills fan tells me I'm being a little bit disrespectful to him. But you look at Mahomes, he had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce for many years. And I would still say the Chiefs have a better depth at receiver than the Bills did last year. Because Kelsey and Diggs 1-for-1. The rest I would give the Chiefs. I think now drafting
Absolutely.
Dalton, and obviously the Bengals had the best receiving core in the NFL. That's not even close. I think now you get Dalton Kincaid to Josh Allen. You maybe will get that he doesn't have to do as much Superman ball. He doesn't have to play, and I'm a Steelers fan, I've said this many times, Ben Roethlisberger style football where he has to put the whole team on his back. Once Ben had all the pieces around him, he didn't play as much Superman style. I think we could see something similar with Josh Allen this year, having a Dalton Kincaid.
It'll be interesting to see. Last thing, if he doesn't come around, is it because Dable's not there?
That is a possibility, and maybe it's not so much Dable's not there. Maybe it's they made the wrong choice offense coordinator, that the play calling is not as good. And maybe it is their offense line. It'd be hard to argue Dable, and then you're going to look at it like this. Do the Bills maybe look to upgrade the coach? Which is something weird to say because I think Sean McDermott's a great head coach. But do you look to bring in like one of those offense masterminds like a Brian Dable, or dare I say you find yourself an Andy Reid? But that's going to move.
Andy Reid's not very sure.
Andy Reid ain't coming around. If he is, I'll be damned. But here's the thought. So, while we're talking about coaches, we have seen teams trade for coach even just this past year. Let's say the Rams are headed to a horrible rebuild and the Bills need a brand new offensive mind head coach. How would you feel about Sean McVay coming to Buffalo in a trade? And this is hypothetical as all can be because I don't think McDermott should be removed. How would you feel about Sean McVay being traded to Buffalo to work with Josh Allen if we were to see Allen struggle a bit without Dable?
I'll go to LA and pack his bags for him.
I'm sure you would. But as an unbiased fan, how would you view it?
I think it would be absolutely amazing. He is such a genius when it comes to his offensive play calling. And one of the things, if you remember when Goff was at his best, the short passes opened up just the downfield things. And Josh is good at both the short and the downfield. And his downfield is, so much more impressive than what Goff does. So I think it would be amazing. And the fact that they input so much running game into that, it would take a lot of the stress off of Josh as well.
Yep. And that's going to wrap us up with the Bills in this little segment. Up next, we have to talk about the Miami Dolphins. And the big question is, you look at all this talent around. They have talent receiver, talent at the defense position. The secondary looks good. The big question for the Dolphins are, could they survive a Tua injury? So I'm going to pass to you. Could the Dolphins survive a Tua injury and thrive, or would we see something similar last year where they just struggle?
I think that if they get a Tua injury, especially, no offense, because there are quarterbacks in the NFL, but White and Skyler, I just don't think that they have the capacity, especially in this division with the schedule that they're going to have, to push them over the top. If he goes down early, especially, I honestly think the Dolphins will be out, canvassing, looking for a quarterback to come in and fill the shoes. And I was driving around the other day, and I posed this to you, but could Trey be a potential stop here? Because he does know McDaniel's offense, and we know he's not going to be starting in San Francisco. Could this end up being the eventual home for him if Tua goes down and the prognosis isn't good?
I think that's something very interesting. Trey has the natural tools. The problem has been in San Francisco is the mental game. Can McDaniels maybe shore that up a bit? Like, there's so many things we'd have to talk about there. And the other thing is, could we see them make a trade for a different quarterback as well? I mean, there are guys available, and I'm just going to throw it out there because this was rumored that the 49ers were in talks with him to come in and play for them last year. What if they went out and got a Phillip Rivers?
Yeah, that would be an option as well. Um, I'm not sure if he's fully designed or set up for this system that they run. That's a little bit different, and I guess since the 49ers were talking about it, maybe
Oh,
they could handle it as well. But now he's 2 years removed from football, and the further out you get, it's tough to come back from.
yeah. Same thing with Andrew Luck. I see a lot of people throw out. It is hard to return to football. It's hard to get back and play in shape, and let alone at his age, especially, it's even harder.
Well, and with Luck, good gosh, his body has transformed so much that he'd have to put on 50 pounds just to be the Andrew Luck of old. So yeah, I just don't see that happening either.
Yeah, it's Miami would be is in a very difficult situation, especially because I think the biggest mistake they maybe made was letting Teddy go, and now that Teddy's in Detroit, would you have to call Detroit and offer them a trade package, or like would Detroit be like, "Listen, we like him behind Goff, we kind of want to keep him." Like, do you feel letting Teddy go or not pursuing a better backup this year could be something Miami regrets during this season?
I don't think that they were really happy with Teddy anyway. I mean, when Teddy struggled, right? So I'm not sure that offense is set for Teddy. I wouldn't be surprised if something happened and Trey Lance wasn't available, that you look at maybe an Andy Dalton or somebody like that that honestly could come in and fit in and played pretty well last year. Did he light the world on fire? No. But you could also look at you know Davis Mills out of Houston. Uh, but it'll be interesting to see who gets cut. When they cut from 90 down to their normal squads too. There might be a couple of outlier quarterbacks that everybody's just completely shocked that they're there. So it'll be it'll be interesting to see who's available at that time.
Miami, Pittsburgh's got a Mason Rudolph will only take something very valuable of yours. I'm just kidding. He's not worth a lot. Uh, that's going to lead us to probably the biggest question mark team in the entire NFL, perhaps. How much does Aaron Rodgers improve this New York Jets team?
I think he improves them a lot. You think about how dynamic their defense was, whether or not they should have had the offensive rookie of the year last year, or it should have been, uh, somebody else. Media market is what it is,
Still not
but
bitter about that?
not bitter at all. But uh, you know, he's Wilson is amazing. Brees Hall, when he comes back, if he comes back and is able to just be put right back into the system, was amazing. And to be quite honest, if he hadn't got hurt, I think he runs away with the Rookie of the Year competition last year because he was on a tear. So their offense was dynamic except for one position. Just so happens to be the most important position in football. Their defense was flat out ugly. Their secondary was absolutely one of the best in the NFL. They weren't as great stopping the run, but they were still pretty effective at it. And I think they only got better in the draft, right? So I I think that even if Aaron Rodgers is say 60% of MVP Aaron Rodgers, they're in the playoffs. What happens there? Who knows? But he makes them a bona fide Super Bowl contender just because he's there. Is it going to happen? We don't know. That's why they play the game, right? And there's 17, regular season games to play before that. But he does make them a legitimate contender.
There's one position I'm concerned about on this team because I agree with you. Aaron Rodgers makes this team so dynamic, so terrifying. If he is Aaron Rodgers, my concern with him being Aaron Rodgers is this offense line isn't all that good, in my opinion. They did try and address some of the draft. Wasn't the biggest fan of some of their picks there. Do you have concern with Aaron's injury history behind this offensive line at all?
Well, you have to. I mean, he is 400 years old. And so
he's still younger than you by 10
yeah,
years.
Most people are, all right. But he's at that age where if he takes a hit, it doesn't bode well for him. And so you have to look at that. And it's a big investment and a big risk, right? But they did bring in players to hopefully bolster the offensive line. And the one thing that you'll remember is he does get the ball out pretty quick. So since he should be well versed with the offense, and they've got the entire offseason to work with the players so that everybody's on the same page, I think that they'll be getting the ball out quickly, which will in turn help him from getting hit. If you remember last year, he held the ball longer than he had in several years. And I think because he didn't trust his receivers. So he at least has had some time to work with these receivers, whether that was his fault in Green Bay or not. At least now, he's been in there in the offseason. He can work with these guys. And so they should have some familiarity with one another.
So I'm just going to ask you a quick fantasy football question, because pretty much if you're probably watching YouTube football, you play fantasy football. I think it's a fair assumption. Out of the three guys we're going to list, who would you take first and who would you take last? Garrett Wilson, Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall.
I take Garrett Wilson first.
And who do you take last?
And I like running backs. But I'm not sure if Breece Hall is going to be 100% right out of the gate. And I'm just not sure that they're going to give Cook enough carries to justify taking him that early. I would take Cook last.
Same. I agree with that full-heartedly. And the last question I have, because you pretty much summed up this team as a whole. Defense, awesome. Question on the offensive line. Quarterback is better, but you are concerned with his age and injury history if he'll hold up behind that offensive line. The last thing I have to ask, and the reason why I didn't talk about Miami's secondary in the Dolphins segment, was I want to ask you this question. Whose secondary is better, the Jets or Dolphins?
Is this assuming that everybody's healthy on both sides?
Everybody's healthy. You have a healthy roster.
The Dolphins.
Really?
And the only reason why I say that is because when you look at the teams, and let's face it, they are absolutely stacked, right? So when you look at these secondaries, and Sauce probably has to already get the nod for the best DB between the two teams.
Without a doubt.
I don't think I don't think that that's going to be an issue. I mean, really, I don't think that it is. But, you've got him, right? So, and you've got, why am I blanking on him from the other side? He played in Seattle. So, yeah, this hurts. But anyway, where's their depth?
That is fair. And as a whole, though, would you say that Miami's corners aren't the best scheme fit? And maybe it changes this year under Fangio. And we'll talk about Vic Fangio probably when we get to coaching. Do you think the coaching staff will help, as you said, Xavier Rhodes, who wasn't the best last year? And you kind of talked about a little bit this today. I'd like to have you give your thoughts on this on the podcast here.
I think that Fangio is actually going to make that secondary really special. we always talk about in the NFL, well, such and such signed this huge contract. He went in there and he sucked, right? And well, why does he suck? Well, because where he was playing, you know, Jojo was playing in Timbuktu, and he was playing press coverage, and then he comes across, and now he's playing in a zone. Well, he gets lost in zone, right? So everybody's like, well, he sucks. So why'd they give him so much money? All too often, I believe that coaches think that they can just plug a player in and they're going to fit, and it just drives me absolutely nuts. Fangio, he works to players' strengths, and so with Xavier, when we were talking today, he's great playing off the ball, and he's very instinctual. That's why early on he used to have so many interceptions, because he was able to play more free instead of actually covering up the players. And so I think that that's going to allow him to play pretty dynamic football. And their depth is with Cam. I just think that overall their depth is going to be impressive this year.
You're a bigger Cam Smith fan than me, but we'll say that for the draft talk. The last thing I have to ask you about, pretty much the Dolphins, and I wanted to save secondary questions till we talked about the Jets did that thing. Is Jalen Ramsey's age a concern for you? And with his back injury history, is he their number one or is he their number two? And do you put him on a bit more of a snap count to try and keep him healthy?
I think that he doesn't necessarily have to be their one. He can be, once again, he can be kind of like free to decide where he's going to play. You think about it, not only is he a good press cover, but he's good in zone, and he can actually play some safety as well. So he can, even though he is getting older, although as far as I'm concerned, he's not that old. He's still got a lot of good football left in him.
Yes, but you're 50, so you want to look at these guys like they're 20.
Well, yes, that's true. But he's still got a lot left, I think, and he's going to help make that secondary pretty dynamic. The areas where they gave up last year, free running receivers open, that's not going to happen with him in the backfield. He does, or in playing defense, that doesn't happen. And in Fangio's style of offenses, that won't happen. So it'll be interesting to see just how dynamic they are. But I think that with all the offseason acquisitions that they've had, I think that their secondary is going to be the best in that division.
Really? I'm going to disagree with you, and that's not because I think the Jets have the best secondary in that division. It's not because I think the Dolphins have the best secondary in that division. It ain't the Bills. And maybe this is because of the coaching staff as well, and we're going to talk about this team. I think the Patriots do, and we're going to talk about it in a sec. But the main question for the Patriots is, what can Bill O'Brien and the new offense staff, what can they bring to Mac Jones? How can they help him develop as a quarterback? And overall, is last year just a wash for Mac with the, person they had coaching him on offense?
Last year's a do-over. Seriously, they should just go back and erase that, add another year on his contract, because last year just shouldn't count at all, right? We always talk about how Bill is a great coach. That was a failure on his part last year. So, yeah, that O'Brien is going to give stability, an actual sense of an offense instead of, probably not this bad, but do you remember in the movie The Waterboy? Sometimes you just felt last year that they had that Offense for Dummies book over there and they were looking it up, trying to figure out what plays to run. It looked that inept at times.
I'm going to show my age. No, I do not remember anything from The Waterboy.
Well, for those of you out there that are listening to this and that know what I'm talking about, you understand that their offense was that inept. And so this year they have a plan. They'll be able to execute it. Bill O'Brien is a great offensive coordinator, and he was a really good head coach. Horrible GM, but great offensive coordinator and really good head coach. So he adds instant credibility to that offense. And with some of the pieces that they brought in the offseason, it's going to be a fun ride.
Yeah. I'm a big Juju Smith-Schuster fan. I'm sure that cannot surprise anyone, being a Steelers fan. I love the way he plays the game. Good blocker, physical player, even though you wouldn't think that. I think he's a good addition for the wide receiver core. Tyquan Thornton, man, I think he's going to have a big year this year. I think this is someone that's going to maybe become their number one by the end of the year. I truly think that. I thought Thornton looked good last year, but I thought offense coaching just sucked overall, that it was hard to get him to shine. Tyquan feels like the guy Bill O'Brien would like to highlight in offense, which is why I think he'll be the one. Running back room, Ramondre Stevenson might be one of the most underrated players in the NFL because he's not talked about as highly as he should be.
And I would agree with that. Although, if you'll notice, he does pretty well in the draft, fantasy-wise. So, just because he's not talked about, and one of the reasons why he might not be talked about is just because how inept their offense was last year.
And he was great last year, which should show you how good he is. And the one last thing I want to ask before we go to the defense side of the ball, which I'm sure you could talk hours about Bill Belichick's defense. What does Ezekiel Elliott bring to this team? Is he just a third down pass pro guy, which he does very well, or do you think he'll have a little bit of juice to bring to the run game as well?
That's an interesting question. We had talked about it some today. Automatically, he's going to be their third down back. And as long as he doesn't have to hike the ball, I think he'll be too soon. I'm not sure.
No, it's not. It's one of my favorite plays ever.
All right. But he'll probably get some goal line stuff as well. I mean, he is good around the goal line. But I just think that they need that experience to help protect Matt. So I don't see him having a huge role.
Okay. Now it's time to talk about this defense, which it's got a lot of young talent. That young talent is really good. And I'm going to ask you this. Is there a front seven that has better depth than the New England Patriots?
No, I don't think so. They're stacked at every position, and they're going to have to drop some of these guys, and so you'll see the people they dropped get picked up on other teams.
Okay, this is going to sound crazy, but if I'm San Francisco with some of the depth questions I have for that team, I'm calling up New England and offering a pick for some of these guys.
Well, they don't. San Francisco doesn't really value their picks anyway, so why wouldn't they?
Exactly.
You know?
They have so much depth, and this is going to bring me talking about a guy we both love in the draft process. What does Keon White do here with all this around him and just the explosiveness we even saw against the Texans in the preseason week 1?
He provides utter chaos. He's explosive. We both had him projected in the first round. We were both wrong, but we had him projected in the first round. Both thought he was a first-round talent. He's got a huge chip on his shoulder, and he is an athlete upon an athlete, right? So we saw it against the Texans, albeit he wasn't going up against all the starting offensive line. But he's just utter chaos. He's everywhere. And the thing is about him is he can drop back in coverage, yet he can play inside and he can come outside. He's fast, he's strong, he's violent. Yeah, he's going to make that defense scarier than it was last year. And they were really, really good last year as well.
There's a reason they won as many games as they did with Matt Patricia's offense coordinator.
And it's because of the defense.
And then you look at the secondary as well. there might not be an elite talent like a Jalen Ramsey. I mean, not Jalen Ramsey. I was thinking Sauce Gardner, but Jalen Ramsey still is up there. Or a Javon Holland. Well, maybe a Kyle Duggar. But their depth in their secondary is just, they can throw so many guys at you, which is kind of what they do phenomenal in. And you said something earlier today. How many DBs did you think you could put on the field for them and just be great?
So we were looking at this when we were talking today, and I love how violent Kyle Duggar is.
He's digging your grave. That's what he does.
And Jabril Peppers has really shined since he came to New England. And he's not as aggressive and as hard a hitter as Duggar, but he's still pretty aggressive, and he can still come down into the box. But then I think that you bring in Mapu, and the three of them are honestly in short sets, especially when you're trying to play like a nickel set, but you're still scared that they might run the ball. If you bring Mapu in and play him as like a linebacker / DB, and you can have feasibly 7 defensive backs on the field at one time. And the thing is with Duggar and with Mapu and even Peppers to some extent, they'll come down in the box. They can play like linebackers, not full time, but they can play like linebackers, for a few plays and give you that. But the speed that they can have on that defense at the same time is scary.
I don't do bold predictions on these preview shows because I'm saving it more or less when we do overall predictions. Here's one right here. I think this is the best defense in the NFL this upcoming season. They have so much depth. They can survive injuries. They have talent everywhere, and they have probably the best coach in NFL history, in my opinion, coaching them.
There's not much that can be said other than that.
Yeah. So now let's move on to coaching staffs, because I think we talked long enough about these teams who are very good, and there was a reason we wanted to give them as much shine as possible. But we got to go to coaching staffs now, and I'm going to reveal all my coaching staffs, and you can do yours. But I have the Jets at 4, the Dolphins at 3, the Bills at 2, and the Patriots at 1. What's your order?
I have the exact same order.
Okay, so let's go team by team. Why'd you have the Jets at 4? Because me personally, I like Robert Saleh. I think he's a very good coach, but they haven't gotten it at New York. He hasn't made the playoffs. Well, the other 3 have made the playoffs. I'm not the biggest Nathaniel Hackett fan. I feel like this team, as a coaching staff, is just not there yet, perhaps, and maybe this year they can shut me up.
No, you actually kind of, mimicked what I was going to say. I'm not a Nathaniel Hackett fan either.
He's a hack.
I won't say that. I honestly think that last year he got a raw deal as well. But I love Saleh. If you remember when we were talking about D'Amico and everything, I had brought up the fact that I don't want to discount or take away any credit from what Saleh did in San Francisco, because he's an amazing defensive mind. But when you look at the rest of the staff, they just don't have a lot of the the dynamic players or dynamic coaches. And that doesn't mean that they're bad. Obviously, he's doing something right because their defense was amazing. Most of their offense is dynamic. They have some issues at quarterback, but other than that, they've got some coaches and a lot of players. And I like it when coaches they're pulled from players, because they have game experience and they know what to expect, especially when these guys have played a long time. I mean, they've got Marquand Manuel, they got Leon Washington.
Really?
Yes, they've got Shaq Wilson. So they've got a lot of players, ex-players, excuse me. So they've got a lot of game experience there, but situational offensive and defensive strategies, I think the coordinators are better throughout the rest of the division.
Okay, so this could sound stupid because I miss Leon Washington. Is he coaching running back or special teams? Because for some reason I missed his name completely when I looked at the coach staffs.
He's coaching special. He's the assistant special teams coach.
Okay, that's why I didn't see it. Side note, great special team football player in his time.
Leon was smooth.
Yep, and real quick, I say Nathaniel Hackett's a hack. It's a quick joke. He's obviously intelligent football mind to have gotten as much NFL coaching experience as he has. I'm not his biggest fan. 3, we have the Dolphins, and I'm a big fan of Vic Fangio's defensive mind. I think Mike McDaniels is still a little bit unproven. He only had 1 year as head coach, but that year was really good, which is why I gave him the nod over Saleh. That was just kind of with where I felt. I love Fangio. McDaniels, I saw 1 year. I need to see it again. I think this is a solid staff. I just don't think it's as good as the other two, if that makes sense.
Oh, I agree. I mean, the head coach has only got 1 year. And let's face it, they had some issues last year and they weren't able to rise above it. But I mean, they brought in, one of the weaknesses they had was in their secondary, so they brought in Fangio. I mean, okay, that's a pretty darn good move right there. So, and I mean, Frank Smith seems to have been doing okay as an offensive coordinator, so we'll see what happens. They also have Darrell Bevel there. I don't know how many teams has he coached for now, half the league at least.
Well, I know he's your favorite coach.
He's their passing game coordinator, so that's pretty interesting. I mean, he does do a pretty good job about figuring out game plans for a specific quarterback's needs. So, just there are other teams in this division that have more tenured and have better pedigrees.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. It's my thought process. And number 2, I had the Bills. I like their staff. I love Sean McDermott. I think he's a great coach. Their defense staff's very good. Their offense staff, it's a question mark for me because it feels like they have downgraded since Dable. But that being said, this is the second year, and they are getting a healthy Josh Allen this time. It's a little hard to judge them when the quarterback's not healthy. I feel like they were just second place because the other team has one more assistant coach I like more and the best head coach in NFL history.
Dorsey, I don't know if you can say that he's getting a healthy Josh back because let's face it, Josh started the season pretty well. So, it was when Josh did get hurt, they seemed to struggle. They've got really good defensive coordinators as well. So they've got good coaches, and they've done really well. If you think about where this team came from 6-7 years ago to where they are today, I mean, it's just night and day. And it's because they built a culture, and they have players and coaches all around. It wasn't just, high draft picks on players. It was they brought in the right coaches for those players as well.
Oh yeah, and that's a big thing is they have overall kept their staff together very well from when they started out. I don't think there's been much turnover year from year. The biggest X is obviously Dable, but they have kept the same staff together. They've brought in the right guys. And as you said, they have developed their talent really well, which is a big show of the coaching staff. Number 1, New England Patriots. Bill Belichick's, I could say for how long he's the greatest coach, and I'm just going to keep saying it. They got Jerod Mayo, who I really like. I think Steven Belichick's done a good job there. And I really think Bill O'Brien's the right guy to be their offense coordinator. I think you look at all this together. You look at how New England always has the right positional coaches. And A big strength I will give to Bill Belichick is if he makes a mistake, he doesn't sit on it. He doesn't defend it. He doesn't say, no, it'll work out, it'll work out, it'll work out. He made a mistake by hiring Matt Patricia as their offensive mind. He got fired after a year. He did not hold on to it. He did not say, this will work eventually. He said, it failed. Time to move on. Bill O'Brien's available. He's pretty good. Bring him in. I think that's a big strength to coaching staff is having the right coach to admit when he made the mistake, when he made the wrong hire, and bringing in someone who can do a better job.
Well, look at their coaching staff. Joe Judge, former Patriots, went on to be a head coach, was not successful, but humble enough to come back, and he's a good coordinator, right? O'Brien, once again, was a successful head coach in the NFL, not a successful GM like we've already talked, but he comes back in and he's the offensive coordinator again, and he was a really good offensive coordinator for them before. So they have a history. He knows what Bill wants, and they're just going to move on almost probably like he never left. Except for the fact that they don't have Tom Brady anymore. There is that cap. There is that hiccup.
That is a big loss. And we could spend a while talking about the Patriots coach staff because I know you love a lot of defensive staff. You watch Ron Mayo play football. I mean, as you just talked about players on the Jets staff, it's a pretty good player to have on your staff, and he'll probably be a head coach eventually.
Well, Troy Brown is their wide receivers and kickoff returners coach too. And I love Troy because he was so versatile. Not only did he play offense as a wide receiver, but when they had, lack of depth in the secondary, he actually went and played DB, and he was really good at it too.
I did not know he played DB at one point. Did not know that.
Yeah, he went in and played DB when they needed him. It was insane. And so the fact that Bill has those people that he can rely on that know how he coaches, and they're part of that culture, it's impressive.
Okay, now it's time to move into draft rankings, and like I said, I'm just going to reveal mine, and you can reveal yours. Then we'll talk about, debate it a bit. At my fourth place, I had the Miami Dolphins. Third place, New York Jets. Second, the Buffalo Bills. And first, New England Patriots. Now, what is your rankings?
This is ridiculous. We never agree this much.
This is scary.
Yeah, which means that all these draft classes are going to be bad.
It's impossible. Keon White, man.
Well, if we want to go to the first, why do we have New England as the first? Christian Gonzalez,
who they traded down and still got.
And they got. He needs to toughen up a little bit, but still, he's got all the tools, and they're going to make him something. Keon White. I would have been okay if they took Keon White where they took Christian Gonzalez. That's how much of a Keon White fan I am. I was a little shocked that they took Marte Mapu here, but I love the player. He was one of my hidden gems, so I think he's going to be amazing. I really, really like City Sowell. I think he's he's a mauler. Antonio Mafi, I know you weren't as high on him as I was, but I think he'll be a pretty good guard. You liked Keishon Butte more than I did.
I think Butte has a lot of talent. The question is, can he put it together mentally? And I think we've seen that at training camp. The talent's there. Can he get that mentality? I do think he's at, as you said, Troy Brown's his wide receiver coach. Great player in the NFL, and he's got Belichick, O'Brien. He's got guys that will ride him and will try and get the best out of him.
And, I was watching their first preseason game the other day, and Isaiah Bolden, he is quick.
He's quicker than the guy they drafted that's named Speed.
Yeah, he is explosive. So that was pretty darn impressive. And, I really like Buffalo's draft, too, because I love Dalton Kincaid. Not as much as you did, but I think in this system, I think he was the perfect pick Osiris Torrance is your man crush.
Let me talk about Osiris Torrance. I have
I will.
said it for a while. The Gators' offense line has been dreadful. I'm a Gator fan. I saw they brought in Osiris Torrance, a left tackle from Louisiana last year. I was like, okay, interesting. Oh, they're moving the guard? Well, okay. He's their starting guard? Well, let's see. Was phenomenal. Had a good game against Georgia's defensive line. I don't know if you know this. Georgia's defensive line's really good. He played great for them. Was voted the best offensive guard in all of college football last year. All-American. He transformed that Gators line. He was great in the run game. He was great in the pass game. He is a phenomenal player. How he slipped to pick 59, I don't know. But when he was drafted to the Bills, I was in my kitchen. I was making my dinner, and I saw that, and I said, oh, shit. Josh has that protecting him. Then I'm like, oh, great. Now they have a run game because now they have a guard they can run behind.
Yeah.
And now, your turn of a guy, I did like him, but you liked him a whole lot more, Dorian Williams.
He's a true linebacker. Honestly, I'm going to liken him. The physical measurements aren't the same, but I'm going to liken him to Bobby Wagner. Fast, instinctive. He is going to be a longtime linebacker, and everybody's going to be like, how is it that he made it to the third round?
He went to Tulane. I don't know. That's the best argument I got. So then they picked Justin Shorter, and listen, I'm the one that can talk about the Gators. I watch a lot of Florida Gators football, probably to my own detriment. Justin Shorter has the tools. He didn't really get the chance to showcase them. He got hurt last year when he was kind of starting to pick up speed a bit. He was doing really well, got hurt, and then he just wasn't the same. He came back, I believe, for one game. Wasn't the same player. I think this has the potential to be an eventual steal. He is a big guy. He is 6'4". He's got a big frame. He's got a good jump radius. He tracks the ball pretty well in the air. I think this could be a guy that maybe a year or two from now is a starting player for the Bills in that team.
Well, that's definitely fair. And then when you want to go down to, the Jets had a pretty good draft as well. Will McDonald, you're higher on him than I am. I think you're higher on Tippmann than I am as well.
I don't think so. I think we're right around. We agree on Tippmann.
He was not my favorite center in this draft.
He was
Abaconda.
He was taking over John Michael Schmitz, correct?
Yeah, he was.
I don't get that. I don't.
Yeah, Abaconda. I know you're a huge fan of his.
Carter Warren as well. I'm a pretty big fan of.
Okay. Zach Kuntz. He could be an enigma in this offense just because he's so big. If they just run him down the slot and let Aaron just throw to him, he's definitely not going to take targets away from some of the other stars. But, if he stays healthy with all of his physical tools, he could develop into something pretty special. And, for the Dolphins, they just didn't have enough picks.
I want to talk about Zach Kuntz, and this is, in my opinion, the best 7th-round pick you can possibly do. He's highly athletic, has a big frame, has the tools. That's a guy you take a shot in the 7th round, and if it pays out, you're laughing to the bank. But as we say, the Dolphins now.
Cam Smith. I actually thought you were higher on Cam than.
No, I lost a lot of interest in Cam when I rewatched him the second time. I liked him a lot at first. First watch through, I thought he was good. Then as the draft process went around, I kept knocking him. And I kept wondering why. I went back and rewatched his film, and I kind of saw some issues. He's a little bit too handsy for me. And I'm afraid in today's day and age, he is going to get flagged a lot. And I know a lot of great corners are handsy. I got no problem with that. But I just don't think he's as athletic as some of those great corners that he'll grab and he just won't let go. Like, you won't see like a Richard Sherman who is very good at fighting hands, a Sauce Gardner who's very good at it, because they're so naturally athletic that they can keep up with the guy as well as be aggressive at the catch point. Well, Cam Smith, I think he's just aggressive because he's not as athletic as those guys.
It'll be interesting to watch. A-Chain.
You love him.
System, I like him as a running back. I love him in this system. He's built for this system. So I think he could be a sneaky, scary offensive weapon for this team that, let's face it, last year in the run game, they didn't do as well as you would think a McDaniels running attack would do. So it'll be interesting if he can help bring the running attack to Miami with some of the other acquisitions they made on the offensive line to help bolster that.
Yeah, and their last two picks, Higgins and the offensive tackle from Michigan, I think it's Ryan Harris.
Yeah, to be quite honest,
I didn't watch him.
Nope, I'm glad we're in the same boat there.
Didn't watch him, can't grade him, so give it an incomplete. No, I'm just kidding. They had so little picks that it was hard not to put them at 4 when you look at the other divisions picks. I overall wouldn't be surprised if this team turns out well, because Cam Smith, hey, he's getting coached by one of the best defensive coaches in the NFL. Etienne, third-round running back, going to a great system that fills his need. Like, they fill each other's need. Etienne needs that type of offense to play in, and they need that running back to have. And this can be a real quick question. Do you view this as a better job by the front office and all that for maybe targeting an A-Chain instead of a Dalvin Cook? Getting a younger guy in there, cheaper, healthier. Do you like that instead of them going and doing what the Jets did and bringing Dalvin Cook?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you think about it. What Cook signed for? A little over $8 million, right?
It's a lot of money saved.
Yeah, it's a lot of money saved. Fresher legs, not the injury history. And I said he is built for this system. So just take it and run with it, or let him run with it, I guess I should say.
Yeah. So now it's time for Offense Rookie of the Year, and I'm afraid we're going to keep on agreeing. Dalton Kincaid for me. Who do you got?
Yeah, so far we are on pace with one another.
Thank God the division standings are not going to keep us like that, I can guarantee. Dalton Kincaid, I feel like we talked about him enough when we broke down the Bills. He brings something different to this offense. He is going to try and be their Travis Kelce. Not saying he's going to be as good as Kelce, Chiefs fans, but that's kind of the goal they're going to have for him, is the tight end that get open, find the open spots, get the first downs, be a red zone target. He is a big body, good receiver, not the best blocker, but he overall will fill a need. And they still have Dawson Knox, so he won't be required to be a lead blocker in the run game at all. And you can maybe do the idea I had with Darren Waller in the pre-draft cycle. Just put him in that big slot, intel cornerback, try and match up with him.
Well, it's ironic that you brought that up, because I was actually going to say I don't see him as being a Travis Kelce. I see him as being a Jimmy Graham.
That's fair. Guess what? Prime Jimmy Graham was unstoppable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until he was asked to block. Then he became very stoppable. Or he couldn't stop anyone. You can make that argument. But now it's time to move Defensive Rookie of the Year in. Who do you have?
Keon White.
So, we talked earlier today. That conversation made me change my Defensive Rookie of the Year to Keon White as well.
Copycat.
I was gonna pick Chris Gonzalez. Big surprise, was gonna go Patriot. We talked about Keon White, and I'm not gonna lie, I maybe rewatched some of that Texans game, and I just watched him, and I know it was against backups, but all I could watch and think was, this is a starter going against, it looked like third stringers, and they weren't third stringers, they were backups. He made them look foolish. He was explosive. He was tackling great, which is rare for preseason. He was a monster who I would not want to play against.
Probably going to agree on division MVP as well.
Do you just want to get that out of the way then?
Mr. Josh Allen.
Yep. It's hard to not to give it to him. But hey, here's probably our first disagreement. Who is the best offseason dish in your mind?
Oh, um, yeah, we are probably gonna disagree with that. I'm gonna because that's a tough one. So I think that there are three that should just be in mention. Okay, you have Aaron Rodgers, you have Fangio, and who I'm going to say is the best offseason acquisition is O'Brien. And the reason why I'm saying that is because that that offense was so bad. It wasn't just the quarterback that was bad. Case in point, Aaron Rodgers comes in and fits in. The other side of the offense was good. So the offense was horrible. The whole offense was horrible. And so O'Brien is going to be tasked with fixing all of that.
Best
So,
offseason addition, Bill O'Brien for me as well, and for the same reasons you said. And
oh wow,
I did have honorable mentions, and I ranked them too. Let's see if you agree with my ranking. Second, I had Vic Fangio, just because I think you put Fangio with that Dolphins defense, it can be dangerous. And I had Rodgers a third. And this is not me saying Rodgers was a bad addition. These were three great moves by organizations that saw their weaknesses and made a move.
absolutely. So, are we going to get a difference in division order?
Well, we got Coach of the Year still.
Oh, okay.
Coach of the Year, mine is, and I cannot help but do it when I see the names. I gotta pick the best coach, Bill Belichick. Belichick is, I've said it many times in this podcast, the best NFL coach of all time. With what I think he's got with this Patriots defense, with what I think he has built there, from Tom Brady leaving to getting all these draft picks in to coach them up, that defense is going to be lethal. I view them similarly how a lot of people have view the 49ers this year. That defense is going to stop teams. It is going to be a nightmare to play against, and it's going to win them a lot of games. It's going to get them to the playoffs, and it's going to get them pretty far. So who is your coach of the year?
McDaniel.
Ooh, finally!
Here's my reason why for this. All right. I completely understand where you're coming from with Bill. Makes a lot of sense. I look at what McDaniel did last year for that team, and yeah, they only finished 9-8. They finished 9-8 because of an injury. They were on pace for breaking so many records on that offense. It wasn't even funny. And so what he did this year is he took one of their weaknesses, the secondary, and he brought in one of the best secondary coaches of all time, who just happens to be pretty good coaching other parts of the defense, but is a specialist for secondary.
100%, and I get that as well. It was a very hard division to pick that for, in my opinion, because if the Jets can be a playoff team dangerous, it's hard not to vote Salah. They got the biggest upgrade. They went out and got it. Belichick, as I said, the reasons. Sean McDermott, because that Bills team is going to be great again, and it is hard to still be a dominant team in a division where you have all this talent.
I agree.
It could go to any four of these coaches. I took the coach I think is the best in the division, and I took the coach I think has done the most with the players, considering of the quarterback talent I think he'll have compared to the other teams.
So I think we'll probably be division order different as well, but I'm going to preface my division order by saying I think any one of these four teams can actually win this division. I think these teams are going to beat each other up, and I lean towards the Bills. I have them as taking the division, but in all honesty, I think any of these four teams can win the division. They'll get there differently. One will do it by defense. One will do it with more balanced attack. And then if the Dolphins get there, it's because they're going to just run away with the score.
But my division order is I have the Bills in first, the Jets in second, the Dolphins in third, and the Patriots in fourth.
Ooh. So we do have a disagreement. And I agree with you. I could see any four of these teams, but I lean, and I have a bit more faith in them than I think you do. I have the Bills as first place. I think I just got to take the best quarterback here. I got to take the team that's loaded up all over the field, in my opinion. Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid, an improved O-line. I like the defense. I have to give them first place. Second place, I said my piece on the Patriots. I gave it about Bill Belichick, why I had them as second. This defense is going to be amazing. This is going to be one of the best defenses in the NFL. They are going to be the 49ers of this year, in my opinion. They have so much talent all over the field. They have the right coaches in place. I am terrified of this Patriots defense. Third place are the Dolphins. And I will say this. The reason I have them third and not second, and why I could have ultimately put them fourth, but I decided third, I am afraid of Tua's health. If Tua can't stay healthy, that is a major concern for me. And his injury history it hasn't been good. And fourth, I have the Jets. For the many reasons we have said, but there are unknowns. And the biggest unknown for me is when I look at this division and I look at the talent all these teams have at edge rusher. They have, every one of them can get to the quarterback. The Jets offense line's the weakest to me. And I look at them, they're going to have to play 2 games against that Patriots front seven. That ain't pretty. 2 games against the Dolphins front seven. That's not pretty. And 2 games against the Bills front seven. I ultimately think they're going to have a bit more issues starting out of the gate, which I think is going to just sink them to fourth in this division, but still have a shot to make the playoffs. I think any 4 of these teams can make the playoffs, but I will ultimately just have 2 teams from this division making the playoffs. And that's going to lead me to asking this question. Where do you put the AFC North to AFC East as a dogfight? And the reason why I ask this, and this is more or less directed to the fans, I don't know how these 4 teams match up against each other's closeness. I think the Bills and the Bengals are similar, as in they're so far ahead that it's hard for me not to put them in first place. And then 2 through 4 is going to be a dogfight. It's going to be ruthless. And I could still see a scenario where any 4 of those teams from either division win it, which makes the AFC so much better, in my opinion, than the NFC. I think it's just hard when you look at these 4 teams. I gotta take 2 teams out of the playoffs, and it's unfortunately the Dolphins and Jets. But that's going to wrap us up for this week. We'll be recording the AFC South maybe this week on a Friday. We've talked about it, so that would either be going up Monday, or if we're just going to do it next week as well. Overall, thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned. This has been a lot of fun. We're going through each division previews, and we're excited to talk to you about the AFC South. Trevor Lawrence, Anthony Richardson, Derrick Henry, and how could I forget the brand new shining star of the Houston Texans returning, DeMeco Ryans. Thank you everyone for watching, and see you guys later.